This meeting is being recorded.
All right, perfect. So let's start. Welcome everyone. Good afternoon. So this is our second webinar in the series for everybody who's joined in new, and this is your first of the webinars. We've primarily tried to do something different with the normal format of webinars, wherein we ask our audience, our connections, our customers on pressing issues and pressing questions that they would have in this time's webinar, which is dealing with supply chain management in the manufacturing and D2C companies, right? So basically, they send in their questions, and we bring in our experts in addressing these and how to go about managing those questions that they have. So just before we start, just give you a couple of hygiene of the webinar. So all participants will be muted. You will not be able to share your screen or be able to communicate or unmute yourselves. If you have any questions while the webinar is going on, you can type your questions in the chat box, and when the Q&A session begins, we will basically address those questions. In case during the Q&A session you want to personally ask the speakers your question, please raise your hand and I'll unmute you and you can ask your question. The webinar is going to be recorded, and post this webinar completion, we will share it on our social media as well as our YouTube channel, and you will get a link of the webinar as well. Give you a quick introduction about Ant Diligence. We are a management consulting firm, and we focus on the manufacturing sector. We work on multiple verticals, right from operational excellence, strategy, greenfield project designs, IT strategies for manufacturing, and along with our partners today, we also have a vertical on supply chain management. We're based out of Mumbai and handle projects in multiple different industries. A quick introduction of our speakers today. They are the co-founders of Hypercube Analytics. Hypercube Analytics is a supply chain consulting and a technology company. We have the directors, Dr. Ananth Krishnamoorthy and Tarit Jain. Dr. Ananth, he's the director for science and technology. He has over 23 years of experience in consulting and supply chain management. Previously, before starting Hypercube, he was part of Hitachi Consulting and Jubilant Foodworks. And he holds a PhD degree in industrial engineering and management. Tarit is director for sales and client delivery, over 10 years of experience, and before co-founding Hypercube along with Ananth, Dr. Ananth, he was previously with CGN and Jubilant Foodworks. Tarit holds a master's degree in supply chain management, and I would like to have them introduce Hypercube and just give a quick glimpse of quick introduction of Hypercube as the company. Tarit?
Yeah, hi. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Tarit, and I'll quickly just introduce you to Hypercube, and then we can get started with the webinar. So Hypercube is a 7-year-old company, and we work mainly in the area of supply chain. We build supply chain applications and algorithms that are deployed on the cloud. So most of our applications are on the cloud. Our solutions help companies have streamlined planning, optimize inventory, which results in avoiding stockouts. All this results in increased revenue and profitability for the companies. So, and you can learn more about us by visiting our website, which is www.hypercubeanalytics.com, and we'll be happy to connect. And you can connect with us on LinkedIn and other social media platforms as well. So over to you, Utaya.
Great.
You can take it forward.
Thanks, Tarit. The format of this webinar is going to be, we had asked our audience, like I said, questions. So we're going to post the questions to our speakers, and they're going to give us their experience of handling such, questions earlier. It's going to be, candid. It's going to be opinionated. Like I said, we are not looking at right answers. We are looking at, sharing knowledge. And as for that, if you all have any questions, please do write in the chat box, or you can, ask your questions directly at the end of during the Q&A session. So the typical topics that we're going to be dealing with today are forecasting and supply planning, S&OP, and AI and technology and supply chain management. Ananth, I'd like to ask the first question that was asked to us. So the company is a 3-year-old company in the D2C space. They wanted to know how they could use artificial intelligence in order to reduce their food wastage.
Thanks. So, hi everyone. So I think this is a really good question, and again, tremendous applications for AI algorithms in this area. So right off the bat, right, 3 areas that come to mind that can give big benefits in reducing food wastage, specifically going to this question, and in general, inventory obsolescence or inventory levels forecasting, supply planning, and product lifecycle management. Right. So we'll talk in a little bit of detail with an example use case, but also it's not just the AI algorithms, and it's not even just good data, as a lot of people, sometimes flippantly believe. They say, hey, you need good data to do good AI and things like that. There is some truth to that. It's actually good business process and good workflow that really leads in how companies can really make use of AI data and all that to reduce inventories, food wastage, what have you. So we can look at this example, right? So this is one of our clients. It's a D2C cloud kitchen where we help them plan at a very granular level. So forecasting is the first part of it, right? So being a cloud kitchen on platforms like Swiggy, Zomato, having your own app and all that, you really have to plan at very granular level, down to a location, store, pod, whatever you call it, and an SKU level. Also depends on what kind of products you're selling. Sometimes if you're selling a packaged product, like either a beverage or a cup of dessert or yogurt, then you plan at a finished good level. But again, if you're a cloud kitchen and you're serving a number of different items on a menu, you may actually plan at an ingredient level. So first part of it is to forecast at the right level, and then back it up with good supply planning or algorithmic supply planning. So really make sure that you can take that prediction and as real data rolls in, look at your inventory levels and automatically make replenishment decisions at the stores from if you have a mother DC or a central kitchen, what have you. But also sometimes we go deeper than that, looking at planning sub daily, so multiple times a day, and looking for also opportunities to reduce food wastage by possibly redistributing across stores that are close by, right? If your network has that. So a lot of this, right, as you can imagine, this can't be supported in an Excel based process. It needs a fair bit of automation, AI, data, all of these play in But like I said, right, the process and the workflow kind of leads. So if you have a process, you have a good process for bringing in your data, doing planning, and then reacting to it based on latest data. That is, more than half the deal, more than, and that sets the stage for AI. And once you can get smarter and smarter at your AI as your data builds, as you get more smarter algorithms. But having that process and workflow in place is very important. The other thing is especially in this D2C cloud kitchen food kind of a industry. Most of these are high growth companies, right? They are small companies breaking out, growing fast. They really don't know their market really. It's not like you're selling a rinse soap or something like that for, and you have 50 years of data. So they really have to look at their products both from a forecasting and a supply planning on a very short basis and very, very frequent basis rather. And also look at the performance of their products, by region. So for example, something does really well in the north, but just peters out in the south, and not even south, right? So maybe it does really well in Bangalore, but doesn't do well in Chennai. So you should have an automated mechanism to surgically identify and cut. You don't cut a product that sells really well in Bangalore, but not in Chennai, and you don't make a decision saying I'm going to cut all of South or all of India, right? So you need to be able to use algorithms to make surgical cuts. So manage the product life cycle. So keep local favorites and trim it out where they aren't. So those are all good ways where AI algorithms can help. And if you look at companies when they start, especially without a whole lot of experience as well, the wastages are really, really high. It's even after a couple of years, it's not unheard of. 50-40% wastages is not unheard of. And then eventually, as you get good, that number comes down to below 10%. And then if you're really, really good, you do a really good job, the best numbers are below 5%, maybe even as much as 2%. So yeah, that's what we have noticed in this area. And, the potential truly is immense.
So when a new company starts off, I think it's easier for them to not easier, but good to implement such tools rather than directly jumping onto an Excel. But let's say companies that have been here for like 15-20 years, how do they any advice for them in terms of how they could basically bring this in at post 15-20 years of existence?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there are pros and cons to that, as I see it, right? So the biggest pro is that you got tons of data, and the con on that is, maybe the data isn't all that well structured. You haven't spent a lot of time cleaning it, but the good news is, algorithms can do it for you. The other worrisome piece for companies that have been in this space for a long time is, they tend not to view initiatives like AI as something new. They tend to say that, oh yeah, we've heard this so many times, and they just create an opening for competitors to kind of get a leg up. So things have changed dramatically in the last 4 or 5 years. My to respond to what you're saying, okay, my thing would be to take a second look at what's available now versus even 4 or 5 years back, and kind of look at newer technologies and newer players that are in the market versus the same old players, and kind of investigate before you are obviously making a decision.
Right.
But they do hold a tremendous advantage in terms of the amount of data they have. So that's definitely a positive.
Great. Right. Thanks, Ananth. Let's move on to the next question. So the next question comes in from the cosmetics industry. So in the cosmetics industry, they employ contract manufacturers extensively. And what happens is that they run out of manufacturing capacity. How can they overcome this?
So we noticed this with a lot of growth companies as well, right? To answer their question, the specifics will really depend on what exactly is leading to the problem. But in general, and we notice this across, we have customers in the cosmetic industry, we have customers in other industries, manufacturing industries as well, where they use a lot of CMS, TPMs, key suppliers. The short answer is, good aggregate planning and closed-loop collaboration help in a big way. So what's somewhat worrisome is we notice that even companies that depend extensively on third-party manufacturers or suppliers, they don't do very good joint planning with them, right? So that's something that for whatever reason hasn't taken on, hasn't been given its due importance. So the more you can actually include them in your formal planning processes, that's a big piece of it, right? So including them in your formal planning process. The second part of that is to make sure that it is not a one-way information sharing exercise, but it's really a collaborative review and decision-making mechanism. So if we look at the example that we have there, this might give us more context. So now one of our clients now, right, they give their key suppliers, they include them in their S&OP monthly planning process and give them a 6-month visibility to their requirements. So so that these guys can actually, the supplier can actually look at it and make appropriate capacity expansion decisions. And if you don't give that, right, so they look at their data, especially if you're early in the growth stage and you're starting to climb really rapidly, they may assume that you're going to climb fast. And as you grow, that holds for some time, and then the growth rate comes down, and maybe they make some decisions, and now they turn pessimistic and they don't add capacity in time, and so on. So it's very important that the supplier get a good visibility, and there is it's a planning session, right? It's not a one way that, okay, I'm going to tell you that this is my demand, but it's a it's a two-way exercise where they, and then it's best done in a formal S&OP meeting. It's a two-way exercise where they go through this and say, okay, this is a demand. This is what it implies for the capacity and the raw materials that we are going to, purchase and install on your behalf. So there must be commitments on the customer side as well. It can't be a one-way street that I've given you my demand. You do the best with it. And then a lot of brands do treat it the other way. They just say, I've given you visibility, you should have added capacity, but visibility without commitment actually means things. So so you and I were discussing this one time, long time back, when I was in my PhD program, we were working with Dell, and there was this supplier collaboration initiative where, someone was saying, what do you do with the forecast that Dell gives you? The supplier was saying, well, we have a trash can just next to the printer. We print it and throw it into that trash can. So, this was quite a while back, about 20 years back. But the idea is that, if it is just visibility without commitment, that's really not useful or greatly useful. So if it really, if you treat the supplier as a extension of yourself, especially if it's a key supplier, it's in your interest to do it. And then actually have a meeting to look at, what is the capacity, are we running out? If we're running out, what are your plans of actually adding the capacity? When will the capacity come online? And also, at the same time reviewing what is the share of business I'm giving you and how is it, trending, and am I making good on the forecast that I've given you as my key supplier over the last 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, and so on. So good aggregate planning, is a big part of it.
Right. So Ananth, we have, people who have joined in who are, part of companies that have a very large supplier network. So, when you have a small contract manufacturing supplier network, involving them in the S&OP process would be, much easier. But when you have a very large supplier network, do we, choose, let's say, a tier 1, tier 2, and restrict it to that? How do you have any advice in terms of that?
So, logically, what you can do is really, I mean, you're limited with, you're limited on the amount of energy you can spend on this particular, collaboration exercise. Usually, it is your key TPMs or your key suppliers that you would do this with. You would know who those guys are. If you're, for example, if you're in the pizza business, maybe it's your cheese manufacturers, right? And then, if you're dealing with only a couple of dough wheat mills, then it's those guys, or whatever it is, right? So usually the key suppliers that you need to do this with are usually few. Companies don't typically spread themselves very thin on this. But with technology, what has now become possible is you can at least give visibility to pretty much everyone, right? So you can give conditional or unconditional visibility to pretty much everyone if you have the right technology system. So it does put a lot of pressure on you to do a good job of planning. To some, maybe to 80% or even 90% of your network, it's just visibility without commitments, right? But for your key suppliers, it's got to be different. Otherwise, you are on the receiving end as well, right? It's so that's key here. So if there is a guy that you need to treat with the importance, with due importance, because that is going to come back to you, then you pick those handful and then you work with them.
Right. Got it. Perfect. Thanks, Ananth. Let's move on to the next question then.
Sure.
So this is a two-part question. The company basically is talking about they run promotional and incentive schemes. How can they improve the accuracy of their forecast using AI-based forecasting? And a parallel question is which we can address is that what are the various ways in which forecasting accuracy can be improved?
Okay, yeah. It's a good question. It's something very close to our heart as well. We've been in this area of forecasting time series for a very long time now, and then we've dealt with a wide range of forecasting software and technologies and so on. So the good news is this is indeed a very promising area for advanced forecasting algorithms. So they can do a lot. Especially compared to the way things used to be done traditionally, right? So traditionally, if you look at this kind of prediction exercise, what you call as traditional lift calculations, they're done at a very aggregate level, quite static. You do them once in 6 months or once in a quarter, and you kind of use those values.
Right.
With the power that you now hold in terms of both computational power and power of these AI algorithms and the amount of data, you can do this. You can model lift at a very granular level. So you can do it at an event level. You can look at promos, holidays. You can look at seasonalities. You can look at the breakup of these things. So you can and you can also allocate marketing budgets and things by these interventions. So if you switch the example, this will kind of bring it together. We worked once with a apparel manufacturer in the US where the task is to forecast a very highly seasonal outdoor wear product with almost being an e-commerce operation, almost 200,000 SKUs every season, and then these change. You can see, right? And then they involve a lot of promotions, Uber discounting, all kinds of things. So you can see that teams, and then the client was doing it with Excel prior to us getting involved. So you can see that this, even if you have 10 teams dividing up 200,000 products, it's a daunting task, and you can't really account for how well each individual planner will their SKUs how do they, is everyone good at modeling things statistically? Is everyone good at handling data? Are they good at Excel? So all these kind of things creep up. So a big part of this is again, business, business process and workflow that brings the data, shapes it, and then, you get to put your advanced algorithms. But yes, that's a tremendous area where you can let the algorithms do all the hard work for you. Provided you have data, it can give you a good sense of lift. If you don't have data, it can give you a surrogate sense of lift. Regardless, what we have seen over the last 15 years is machine will beat human planning hands down, especially over scale, right? So, really, there is really no way that a human team can actually forecast this many items and, do a good job of it. The other thing is, you need to be really careful how you use this power that you get with AI and data. As long as you focus your effort on the important stuff, and then, you can actually spend some manual effort on it. The rest of it deserves to be automated, and the algorithms will do a much better job than human planners can, just because, we as humans can't handle that much data and things in our head. So.
Right. So, and there are going forward, you're very right. Large teams cannot handle, as and when product categories start moving higher and becoming higher and higher.
Right.
No matter how big your team is, it still becomes, a daunting task. In terms of, the tools that are out there, which, claim AI, and what is better, an off-the-shelf a tool that claims to have a machine learning AI algorithm built in, or something which is custom made for the company or their type of.
That's a good question. See, I view it slightly differently. I think what is the reality is today, right? There is no software vendor that doesn't say that they don't have an AI algorithm, right? The key really is to understand understand whether the algorithms that are proposed can actually model the things that you are interested in seeing modeled, right? Are they robust to things like missing data? So there is an approach where you say fit all, and you take 50 algorithms and pit everything against each other, and do a pick best. And then this approach has been there for 30 plus years now. What you really want is, and then so what, right? So, the algorithm says, the software says this algorithm was the best. Fine, there is some value to that. I think what you really need instead is a process where, you can actually understand how the algorithm was auto-tuned with the latest data. A process which actually indicates that that certain key signals, for example, causals, promotions, which you typically used to see in the past but are now missing in the future, and it may be very subtle, right? So I used to run 10 promotions a month until last month, and now it's come down to 5. Now, is this a real change, or is it so that only a human can answer? But can the software at least alert you to these kind of things? So I think both options should be on the table. You should consider, off the shelf as well as custom software. But I think what should dominate is the business process and the workflow. So if you start with that, I think you'll make a good decision for yourself. That's how I would look at it.
Perfect. Right. So great. So let's move on then to the next question. So in the next question, they've asked, the team basically has advised them to implement real-time data capturing in their transportation and distribution centers.
Mm-hmm.
Is having real-time data collection mandatory to improve visibility, or is there any other?
Yeah, good question as well, because I've actually been involved in this you know, in different
right.
forms, global track and trace for like more than almost 18 years. So this is very interesting because there's no argument against this. Right? It's hard to argue against it. Good data. We want data faster. Real time is all about the velocity of getting data, and faster is better. And there's no argument against it. But what I would say is the thing to look at first is whether the data you're getting is good data. So if I have to prioritize, I would look at, is it good data versus am I just getting real-time data? And as we progress through this, right, we'll talk through some more. But if you look at the problem that we are facing in the last 10 years, it's one of big data, right? Even small companies, there's a lot of data, tremendous amount of data that we see coming to us. And why only talk about real-time data, right? So if you talk about the 4 V's of big data, real time is about velocity, but you also have volume of data which has exploded. You also have variety. You have data that can come from a number of different ways. And what about data that comes in that's corrupted, faulty, bad, good, all of these things, right? So what you really need is structure to get data, and it's something like your capability, right? So you can go into a gym and suddenly try to lift 100 kilos, and you can break your arms and legs. So are you capable of ingesting what kind of structure do you have? So if we go to the example that we can, so there is this client that we are working with. They have a significant number of international shipments coming in from the Oceania, New Zealand region. So if you think of it, right, there's some stuff that's getting on a ship, and that ship is going to come to you in, let's say, 3 weeks or 4 weeks. So it's not that. I would imagine it's not that important that as soon as they give you the information, that information lands with. That's what is real time, right? Right. It's very important to know that information was supposed to come to you in the first place. So let's say that 1st of May, a shipment should have sailed, and the update happened on 15th of May. But as soon as the update happened, I received it within a nanosecond. Well, that's real time, but you know what? You missed it by 15 days. So there should be an automatic checkpoint where you have to look at this in terms of events, and you also have to look at the occurrence and non-occurrence of events and track those and make sure that if a person or a system is supposed to be sending you data, that data gets received. If it is not received, there is a feedback loop, or there is a mechanism to prompt the sender, again, person or system, to resend that data. And if there is any issue with the data in terms of corruption, having a proper handshake mechanism, and if everything can't be resolved automatically, to get a human involved in the loop. So all of these things are probably more important or as important as getting data faster. I mean, eventually, right, once you bake this in, faster is better. There's no doubt. But getting the structure together to be able to receive the data and do something with it, get value out of it, get insight out of it, that structure and the process is probably something that people don't usually, think enough about.
Yeah. Got it.
So I would say, it's hard to argue against real-time data, but make sure that you have a good process and workflow in place before you start chasing, all kinds of technologies and Kafka and all kinds of things to make it, real time.
Right. Nice. So let's move on then to the next question, and I'd like to bring Tarit in here. So Tarit, the question is from the company which operates through 60 plus super distributors and feed and they feed Indian and they feed the Indian retail market. They say that we do not have visibility of sell-through data from these distributors. Can we benefit from demand planning? Demand planning is a very important subject that a lot of people tend to really miss out on. So if you can just take us through your views on this.
So interesting question. So basically, so we have a client who actually started with demand planning, and this started way back just when the COVID scene started. So I'll explain you through that example, like how necessary it is to even have sell-through data, and can you do demand planning without even sell-through data. So that time when we started planning, they did not have any sell-through data, and you can't really expect just when things opened up in probably June, you can say June 2020, these guys came up that we want to do demand planning because our planning is becoming uncertain. Few of our guys have left, they haven't come back. So there was a big mess, and so they are into manufacturing industry and decorative, I can say a laminate industry probably. So it was a big mess for them, right? So when they started, they were like, give us something that we can start doing our planning, because the main person who was doing planning, he's left the organization and he will not come back for whatever health reasons. And so we made a simple planning tool for them, which had backend as a Python and some AI, but front end was Excel and the backend was also Excel because those guys were used to it. And the planning worked really well for them. They could actually not be dependent on that person anymore, and could do ad hoc planning as and when required. Like, okay, these things need to be manufactured. These SKUs are low selling. They don't need to be manufactured. The call could be taken by the management. So that worked for them. Few months down the line, probably, yeah, last year they came up with an idea. Okay, this ad hoc planning is working. How about if we have distributor data as well? So we were like, will your distributors really give you data? They were like, yeah, they will give. We can talk to them. So, so my point of bringing this up is that you don't really. So a lot of people, right? They have that hesitancy that why will my distributor or retailer or my second party give me data or share the data? You just need to know the sale data. You don't really need any where he's selling, at what price he's selling, because everyone is hesitant in sharing the details to whom he's selling. Maybe the company might directly approach them. So these guys came up with this plan, and we told them that, yeah, why not use our distributor portal that we have, and you just tell your distributors to start entering sales. So it's for the distributors, just enter simple sales data, and that's it. And from that, we are able to give them order recommendations, which is really working well. Even in fact, they've rolled it out for the regional distribution centers, which are owned by the company. So the entire order is automatically generated based on the sales data, and he gets to know the health of the entire inventory, like what's selling, what is non-selling, what inventory needs to be liquidated somewhere. And we've seen reduction in inventory levels, probably, uh, I'm not exaggerating, 40 to 50% at every distributor end, because they were stocking items that were not really selling well. And we have about 1 year's data, so we get a fair bit of idea what will sell in the next year. For new products also, they basically link it with, okay, this is kind of similar to the existing product, and you can start forecasting or giving order recommendation based on that. And this tool even has intuitive dashboards that even distributors are using, and they're pretty finding it very useful, because on the dashboard you get to know the top performers, the items that haven't been sold at all. So they talk to the company and probably see if it can be sent somewhere else or liquidated, because net, if the distributor is not able to sell the product, your payment terms are delayed. There is financial stress at the company, and the distributor will probably delay your payments, which in turn will hamper your working in the factory. So there's been tremendous benefit with this sell-through data. What I would like to tell is that you don't really need a detailed sell-through data, even if your retailers or distributors just gives you every day this much quantity of this particular SKU has been shipped. That is more than enough to make your demand planning even more sufficient. But the other thing that you don't really need to wait, the distributor starts giving you data. Like I told you, in 2020, when they started, it was just a demand planning tool, just from what was being shipped from the factory to every retailer or distributor. From there we started. And after a year, those guys were like, okay, why not get the secondary sales and make it even more efficient and effective? So yeah,
Right. So just
probably,
a quick.
yeah.
So, until now, we've spoken about, some good topics, right? We have spoken about forecasting. We are right now, we're talking about demand planning. If you look at, the overall sense under the word planning, there is really in companies no bifurcation between, there's a bifurcation between a forecast, but there's really no bifurcation between a demand planning and what actual planning happens, say, for in the manufacturing unit itself. Could you all share some, a very brief differentiation between a forecast, a demand plan, and say, a shop floor or a manufacturing plan?
Yeah. So Tarit, I'll take that. So here's a good example, right? So the same case that speaking about, a forecast is a statement of what you expect. It's a prediction, right? It's what you expect to sell based on your past sales. A demand plan really is a statement of what you are, what you are planning to do. The forecast may be for 100, your demand plan may be for 120. So demand plan may be linked to, being aspirational on the sales side, or being more realistic based on the inventories you have and can deploy, right? So demand plan and forecast don't necessarily need to match, although usually they are close. A demand plan then has to translate into replenishments that have to trickle back into the supply chain, to go upstream in the supply chain. So if you think of, so you're right, there are a whole bunch of different plans that come into play. So there is a master plan which kind of takes this. If you look at, if you look at the demand plan for the next, let's say, 12 to 18 months, master plan would then take this, and net it out with the inventories that you are available, and inform all the participants in the supply chain, whether that's you or your supplier or even your logistics provider, that this is what you expect in terms of load on your facility or your operation over the next so many months. You take it down one more level. There is a replenishment plan, which is a firm set of orders. So a master plan is just, it's a guidance given. It just tells you that this is what we expect. A replenishment plan, on the other hand, is firm set of orders that say, hey, I need this amount to be supplied from this supplier to this DC, or this mother DC to this child DC. And then if the factory involved, that would again trigger a manufacturing plan, an MRP run, a schedule, and so on. So quite, depending on how sophisticated you want to get and how sophisticated you need to be. I mean, there are a number of things that mesh with each other and should be done. They do give a lot of benefits.
Right. All right. Great. Perfect. So we do have some questions coming in our chat box, which we'll address, like I said, in the Q&A session. So just for everyone joining, who have joined us, please, if you have any questions, type it out in the chat box, or wait for the Q&A session. Raise your hand, and you can ask Ananth or Tarit the question directly. So the next question. So the company basically says that their inventory turnover is about 3.5 months. They're facing challenges in reducing this time due to high lead times of their products and variable demands. What approach can they take to reduce this inventory turnover time?
So, in general, the more variable your demand is, you benefit from pooling the demand somewhere in the supply chain. With longer lead time items, you benefit by kind of having more frequent replenishments and things like that, which also targets variable demand. But kind of stepping back, right? Not where we notice these kind of questions usually come from, at least from our client bases, when and do we have an example on this? Do we have an example?
Yeah.
So when we are operating multiple warehouses, especially with mother warehouses feeding child warehouses and so on. So if you usually have a small number of inventory locations, right, and then they are independent, this people figure out good ways of manufacturing managing their inventory. When it comes to a network, a distribution network, a manufacturing distribution network, that's when things start getting complex, especially ones that are quite spread out. So something that really helps there is good planning. A good distribution planning system can help you manage inventories quite well. We had a client where we very fast growing company, and they had a total of about between mother and child DCs, almost about 10 distribution centers, quite big ones, and they onward fed to other distribution centers, Amazon and what have you. So prior to our involvement, they were working with multiple teams, teams localized to distribution center level, and then some teams split by channel and so on. The problem is when you rely on Excel to do all these things, again, same as the apparel company example, how good are you at, how good, and you have to ask, is each team equally good? How good is, managing data in Excel? The situation we had here was to plan a month. It used to take a month of work to plan for a month of replenishment activities almost. So that's a terrible amount of delay, right? So it doesn't give you a chance. If something changes in your demand, to rerun your plan is literally impossible. So by putting in a distribution planning system, the planning cycle went from about 4 weeks, about 8 people, planners directly, maybe 15 in total, to about just a total of 1 planner, 15 minutes. Okay, doesn't mean the rest of the people are not required anymore. It just means that their task is not one of juggling data, doing all these things. Their task is one of taking a look at the plan and making sure that the plan is correct, the inventory levels, lead time assumptions are correct, safety stock levels are correct. So they can spend more time to what ifing and those kind of activities, rather than just barely making the plan by end of the month and just being relieved that they got the plan in on time. So again, come to my usual harping about good business process and good workflow. So if you have those things, and with whatever data you have, you can always beat how you do it without a system, and you can have a very systematic process that is fast. Obviously, the more data you have, the smarter the algorithms you use, so we generally take the approach of, let's get you in quickly, let's have you working on a system, get the process in first, and then make the process smarter. Sometimes it's the analogy is you don't start riding on a Ducati bike the first day. You probably one day, when you're a kid, you rode a small tricycle, then you got on a cycle that taught you balance, and then eventually you were able to creep up to this. So it's very important that people not also wait saying I'll get good data one day, I'll get this superb software. The time to act on these, if you are working with a situation like this, it's high time that you get yourself a system. You can upgrade the system, you can change the system, but it's high time that you do things systematically.
Right. Great. So let's move on to the next question. So this will be the last question that we have. After that, we'll go on to the questions raised by people who have joined us. So what KRAs are likely to improve by implementing an SNOP plan? How can they effectively integrate sales with operations planning?
Yeah, it's certainly a question that is close to our heart. So one thing that we notice is when there isn't a good understanding of sales and operation planning that we have seen, especially over the last 7 to 10 years, and especially in India, worldwide as well, but in India specifically. So a lot of people think that if you plan sales and you plan operations, then you're doing sales and operation planning. That is incorrect. So when we typically talk about a full-fledged sales and operation planning process, what it really means, it's a process done by the senior management in a company, and that's the first thing. It works at an aggregate level, and you're not talking about individual SKUs, or rather, very rarely, unless you're doing a very important product launch, you very rarely talk at a SKU level. You're usually talking at a product group level, at a factory capacity level. You're talking at a higher level, and really what you're trying, the people in this meeting are people like your head of supply chain, your CEO, your COO, your CFO. And what are they doing? They are making sure that they actually make decisions. So this is not a review meeting where we see places where the SNOP meeting is a review meeting, right? So they present a backward-looking statement of this is what we did last month, last quarter. So that's really not an SNOP. Even if you present sales and operations, even if you present at an aggregate level, that's only part of it, right? That just tells you how well you did or didn't do, looking backwards. So SNOP really is okay. That's a basis, but let's look forward to the next 6, 12, 18 months, and let's make sure that do we have the capacity, the inventory, the resources to support our sales, and if decisions need to be made to then that decision could be to either deploy more inventories, cut inventories, put more capacity in place, and none of these things can be solved by actually doing detailed sales or operations planning, right? By doing master planning, scheduling, none of these things can be done. These are only things that top management can do, and again, this ideally these meetings should end with the top management kind of saying, yes, we are going to take this capacity addition or this inventory increase plan in the next capital budgeting cycle or what have you, right? So that's really more than kind of talking about which KRAs will improve. I mean, it touches a number of KRAs. So I don't think it's prudent to talk about which specific KRAs will improve. Okay. But doing it right, I think that's where the focus should be. Where get the right people, get the right data to them, help them make decisions, and get them to make decisions, not review something and then go back and have a separate process for again escalating capacity requirements or inventory requirements or sales cuts or sales increases separate.
Right. So good point there that you raised, that if you're doing sales planning and you're doing operations planning, and then you call it sales and operations planning, but that's not what really SNOP is. If companies have to really seriously think about having an SNOP process, what should the typical steps that they should take to say that we are now running an effective SNOP rather than a sales and sales planning and operations planning in a review?
So you implemented these processes at a number of clients. What we kind of think makes these things effective is really making sure that you understand what SNOP is. That's where it really starts, right? So and this cannot be championed from manager and bubble up to an executive level. It has to come from top down. It doesn't work otherwise. That's the first thing. The second thing is it needs an SNOP champion. It needs a dedicated, dedicated is not the right word, but it needs a person dedicated to making this happen on a monthly basis. So there is going to be all kinds of issues in terms of people not giving the demand plans on time, people not finishing their part. So typically it's a 4 or a 5 step process, as as all of us know. There is a data gathering, demand review, supply review. Sometimes there is a product review, there is a executive review, and then there's a financial closure or something like that. So and then it changes, right? This is like a textbook version of it, and it changes with each company. But the idea is there must be someone who should chaperone this whole process and who has enough stature in the company who can actually make this happen. To give it to a manager level guy, he cannot go to the VP of supply chain or head of supply chain and say, your stuff is not done and you need to do it. So, again, I think empowerment is number one, process understanding is number two. And then, obviously, software helps. We've also seen it done reasonably well in smaller companies, reasonably well with Excel. So, I mean, my take would be really, empowerment and understanding of the process are the two big things that at least we have seen over the last 10-ish years.
Brilliant. Ananth, Tarit, thank you very much for answering these questions. In terms of the questions that were sent by previously from the webinar, we've addressed all of them. Let's move on to the questions that our audience who have joined us today have raised. So I'll read them out one by one, and you can basically take some time to answer them. So the question is raised by Shrikant. So the question is, what's the amount of data required for AI-based demand forecasting? One of our associates told he requires 3 years data to predict seasonality. Very difficult to collect in an MSME sector, in an MSME company.
Yeah. It's a really good question. And I would also venture to say this is one reason why, here's the right answer. So I'm going to answer your questions second, but I'm going to say something first that's more important probably. Let's not make what is the right sentence here? Let's not make the great the enemy of the good or something like that, right? Even in large companies, you may find more data, but you almost never find perfect data. Almost never. Only companies like Facebook, Google, these are the only guys that can pull these things off at scale, right? Vast majority of brick and mortar companies, when we get into, and I have done, forecasting, demand planning engagements where, Fortune 500 companies split across 3 or 4 continents. You would imagine, right? These are great companies. They must have huge IT budgets. The data quality would surprise you. It may not be as good as you think. But for an MSME company, high growth companies especially, the biggest danger that I see is this kind of talk that AI algorithm will not help, and really that answer is correct from a textbook sense, but from a practical perspective, it actually is it's going to set you back. I think what you need to do, in my opinion, is get started. There will not be a day when you will have the perfect algorithm, the perfect amount of data, and waiting for that day, you are going to miss benefits today. In a textbook sense, do you need 3 years of data? Usually why this thing is said, right? So statistically, for every data point that you want to predict, you need 3 data points in the past. Okay. So if you want to predict yearly seasonality accurately, you need 3 years of data. True. But look at it another way. Your competitor who doesn't have an AI analyst, who doesn't advise him that way, is actually going to do this, and they're going to get benefits before you guys. You're going to be 3 years behind. So this is actually an incorrect way to look at the situation. This is a case in which you are technically correct, but from a business wisdom perspective, you may be missing the boat if you kind of take this approach.
So Ananth, I would just like to add,
yeah.
So the wooden industry manufacturer, which I just mentioned, they were probably just 9 months into ERP when they said, okay, let's get started with demand planning. So you need to have that kind of wisdom and a bigger picture in mind to get started, rather than waiting for 3 years and then doing something. Right. And like within a couple of years of ERP, they have a distributor portal in which automatic orders are coming. So you need not really wait that long.
All right, perfect. So
That's also a company. It's not a very big manufacturing company. Yeah, it falls under MSME category only. So
right. So it's basically the intent, to move into this way of analyzing data rather than the quantum of data that we have.
I mean, it's basically getting started. Just do it is really important here, because especially for growth companies, right? So one of the cloud kitchens that we work with, they got tremendously good at their food wastage, and really did well when it came to getting valuation and all that, because they started when they didn't even have forget about ERP, they didn't even have a system to hold their orders. So it's important to get started. It's important to overcome all these issues, and waiting is actually a very bad idea. That's what we found in the last 4 or 5 years. It's you may be statistically correct, but you may lose the boat in the process.
Right. So the next question comes in from Rahul, and I don't know, Ananth, Tarit, I will leave it up to you as to how much you can answer this.
Okay.
Could Hypercube briefly talk about the use case on Tata Steel Jamshedpur's optimization modeling, which you all have done, outcome from the implementation and actual scope of the solution?
So we can do it at a kind of a high level. Okay. So it's basically the problem statement there is, and we'll keep it, short in, so that we don't divulge anything beyond what we should, but we can divulge some. Yeah. So here is the thing, right? So these steel plants are huge. They, the network inside the steel plants, a lot of the movement is through rail actually. And, rail basically, is not as flexible as you can imagine with trucks, right? A truck can go on a road can, you have another road, it can take it. Whereas rail is actually, rail has to exist, and then the, rail has to go inside. So the problem statement there is, considering strategic expansion plans, is a rail network adequate, to supply, to move goods in and out of the steel plant at the volumes that they desired. And the case here was, we did, so it's not your traditional optimization where you do some kind of, mixed integer models or something like that. We did a simulation based approach, and, we've done it at multiple Tata plants. And this kind of tells you at different, levels of growth, what their bottlenecks are within the plant, which specific lines, which specific resources become bottlenecks. And based on that, we make recommendations on what needs to be improved. So that's, to that extent, we can share some details. So yeah, it's a simulation based approach to optimizing and uncovering bottlenecks. And that's really the only approach that works for complex networks like this.
Perfect. So we have time for one more question. If anybody wants to raise their hand and ask Ananth or Tarit a question, please go ahead. I will unmute you and we can take one question. All right. So I don't see that there are any questions. So you can raise your hand in the reaction tab. You will have a reaction tab. You can raise your hand on that. Okay. So this question comes in from Sudipta. How to fix an inventory level when your demand for FG is in fluctuating manner with seasonal demand?
So I think the question actually has the answer in it. So you need a dynamic inventory policy that kind of tails your demand fluctuation, right? So you need something where, so the way we do it, right? So the way we do it is we actually, predict the seasonality of the demand, and then we simulate inventory policies and optimize from those simulations. The dynamic inventory policy is going to be. So the policy has to be dynamic. You can't set static policies and say that assume a normal demand and so something like that, and it will fluctuate around the mean. It doesn't. The mean itself shifts. So you need a dynamic policy that and very honestly, what we have found more benefits in having simulation-based approaches that don't make any assumptions about the nature of the demand or the statistical properties of the demand. We are able to get some better numbers with that.
Okay. Sudipta, I hope that answered your question. So Nile wants to ask you all a question. I'll unmute Nile.
Sure.
Nile, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry I joined in a bit late, but I was there, and so I'm not sure if this question has been answered to, but typically when you want to do some kind of this is an extension to the data question. Do we have enough data to do a forecasting or a proper planning? Now, most organizations, the forecasting or planning is more accurate if you have other data sets with you which are not in your organization. These can be weather indicators. These could be economic growth in the area. Could be because now with the the environment changing at a phenomenal pace, using your own historical data really does not give you an indication if you've planned growth levels. The issue today with most people is that where do I get this data? Is there, and how do I standardize it with the data that I already have? I mean, unfortunately, in our country, things are not available only at the pin code level. Some are available at the district level. Some are available at the state level. So this is a challenge. I just want your reaction to it. Is there a way that we can overcome this, or that's more or less what I wanted to ask?
Sure. It's a good question. We so two things, and this is a no holds barred kind of a forum, right? So I'll give you our experience. May or may not reflect everyone's experience that you may talk to, I guess. So we went through this exercise about 4 years back, where there are some. So one answer to your question, there are so you buy this data, right? So there are enough vendors now. For example, especially with weather data, right? You can buy this data. You can subscribe to APIs. They will give you pretty decent data on temperature, precipitation, cloudy days, those kind of things. Okay, there are a few other data sources where you can get, and then those are very, very granular. So they can go beyond pin code. They can go at a lat-long level as well. So that I don't see weather data being an issue. That's purchasable. Other kind of data is a little questionable, but you can still get them at an aggregate level. For example, if you want to get demographic data, there's some data sources like CIE pyramids or something like that, where it's a little more aggregate data. Maybe it's at a district level or something like that. Here is the honest. Here is our experience. Okay, let me not quantify it in any different way. We haven't found any tremendous difference by incorporating this data than with the time series data that we have found. So we usually find that people can do a lot, miss a lot in their own data. They don't put in proper, events. They don't put in things that are in their company and they know about. in our experience, that seems to give a lot of value. Now, again, it's statistically what you're saying is correct. There is benefit, but we haven't seen companies that have done this. What we have seen is companies are struggling even to get their events data, their promotions data, those kind of things in place. And it is 2022. This is still the case. So the good news is there are enough APIs and data sets that can be purchased. I think for certain category of foods, and then you have to sometimes model a little bit more. You need to model competitor actions and things like that to get a good predictive model. But the data is becoming a lot more easily available on a subscription basis. You don't need to, for example, in the past, you needed to get minimum 25-30 lakh rupees or starting packages starting at that to get any data. Now you can buy APIs at very, very cheap prices, because they're giving you individual data streams, so as to speak, and for a limited amount of time. In our experience, this, at least our experience spanning about my own experience about 18 years in this, we haven't seen benefits to this. Rather, I would put it, there is more to be gained first by having, doing a good job of the data that you already have. I haven't seen companies that have, overcome, said that, okay, I've overcome, I'm really doing the best with my data, but I actually need additional data sets to kind of get to the next level. So that's our experiences.
Nilay, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thanks a lot. No, it does.
Perfect. All right. So with that, we'll end the session. Thank you everyone for joining us. It was excellent. The questions that you all have asked, prior to starting this, which we have received from you all, as well as the questions that you all have raised, in the Q&A session. I'd like to thank Ananth and Tarit for being excellent speakers of this. And if you all want to reach out to Ananth or Tarit, please reach out to them over LinkedIn, or you can go on to their website, which is hypercubeanalytics.com, and you can connect with them as well. We'll send you an email of their contact details, so that you can, if you have any more questions on this, please feel free to reach out to them. With that, thank you, Ananth and Tarit, again. We look forward to having you on more sessions like this.
Great. Thank you all. I want to thank Intelligence, and we also want to thank the audience. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you,
everyone. Yeah.